Do you like games? I like games. Do you like games too? I like games too. I like games too.
All right, the year is 2001. Harry Potter and the Sorcerer's Stone and Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring, both playing in theaters. Gamers are testing their skills with Grand Theft Auto 3, Max Payne, and Final Fantasy X. And Jeff Johns brought Hawkman back from the dead, or from out of continuity limbo, in the pages of Justice Society of America. And I also got a letter printed in JSA number 26 that year. 2001 also saw the US release of Shadow Hearts for the PlayStation 2, followed in 2004 by Shadow Hearts Covenant, and in 2006 by Shadow Hearts From the New World. So my thoughts today are going to be focused on the first two games in the series. After reading some promising tidbits in PlayStation Magazine, I found myself a used copy of the original Shadow Hearts for PlayStation 2, hoping that it would just kind of tide me over until Square released a new Final Fantasy game. And what happened was that I discovered not just a half-decent tide me over JRPG, but a game that, for my tastes, blew Final Fantasy X out of the water. Let's talk about the story and script of both games. They're set in an alternate history pre-World War I Europe. Although there's some modern tech that exists. So I mean, if you get caught up in like the trappings of, that, it's not at all true to the history. I mean, the clothes aren't really the same. It's just kind of like a mashup of styles and ideas and stuff, with that rough time period as kind of like its default to start with. But I mean, there's like radio technology, spy technology, because one of the characters in your party in the first game is like a female spy from America, and she's got all kinds of spy tech that, like, I mean, didn't remotely exist. It was more like, almost 2001 kind of technology. It's very Cthulhu inspired and dark. That very kind of ominous, the supernatural is this dark other world, and too much exposure to it will drive you insane. We can't handle the realities that exist in the spiritual world. It's that kind of a setting. Your party is a group of supernatural investigators, I guess kind of like Ghostbusters, that go around and solve supernatural mysteries. Although you're not really solving mysteries in the game, you're just going to people like, oh, my dead husband is haunting us, can you do something about it? And then you do something about it, So I guess they're like investigators and exorcists in that sense. So during the games, you're going around banishing evil creatures, and in the first game, you're also trying to stop an evil wizard who wears this awesome top hat from using a young girl that's in your party who has some unique attributes, mysterious attributes about her that can be used potentially to destroy the world, of course. And so he's trying to get her, and you're kind of on the run, and then you're trying to kind of chase him down and fight him at the same time too. It's that kind of stuff. The first game is mostly text driven. It's a blend of strange, creepy, kind of story, and with small amounts of offbeat humor. But for the most part, it's a fairly dark and serious story. The story, I think, though, is only interesting because it's different, because the setting's different, because it doesn't use quite all of the same kinds of cliches that you would find in other traditional Japanese RPGs. So the story is not, I didn't think, super compelling in and of itself. But it's interesting just because it's different, and even today I think it's different, and you might be asking yourself, wow, where are they going to go with this, and what kind of ideas and concepts are they going to be exploring here? So I think it's still interesting, even though it's not like really compelling and you're like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen next? It's not one that I really was emotionally involved in. The Covenant story, Shadow Hearts Covenant, the second game in the series, that story is similar, except the one with the unique characteristics inside of them that could potentially be used to destroy the world is the hero from the first game, and he's really the only returning main character in the second game in the series. All the characters from the first game do not return for the second game, but now he's kind of being chased down and used and abused for his potential power to destroy the world. Although Shadow Hearts Covenant goes much heavier on the side of comedy, and the kind of silly, goofy Japanese anime comedy that's actually a big turnoff for me. So that's a bit of a bummer. Now, the first game is technically a sequel to a PS1 game called Kudelka, but you really don't have to know anything about that game to get into Shadow Hearts. In fact, I didn't even know, I don't think, that Shadow Hearts was a pseudo-sequel to Kudelka until after I'd been playing the game or after I'd finished the game. I eventually did go back and buy Kudelka to give it a try, and the gameplay is entirely different. It's still a very dark setting and, and very similar in that way to Shadow Hearts 1, but the gameplay, the combat, I just hated it. I hated it. And so I ultimately got rid of it. I didn't get more than a few hours into it, actually. Okay, the graphics and sound. So, I mean, these are PlayStation 2 games, which you might expect. The first one has a lot of pre-rendered backgrounds that your 3D sprites are moving around on. The second game, much more often, has full 3D backgrounds. I don't know that that's necessarily a plus. I really liked the dark, detailed backgrounds of the first game, and you lose some of that in that era of video games when you transition from that into full 3D backgrounds. Even though the camera can move in ways that, it of course couldn't when it's pre-rendered backgrounds, you lose some detail, I think, in some of those backgrounds. And so that's, it's a minor thing. It's apples and oranges, really. It's just two different types of approaches to a game like this. Let's see here. The creature design is bizarre and disturbing in the first game. I mean, you've got you're fighting dogs that instead of snouts have human arms, and they're balancing on those arms so that their legs are sticking up in the air, and then they turn around and things will come out of them, and it's just really disturbing. So I mean, if you like monster type creature designs from movies like John Carpenter's The Thing, then you'll probably really just be fascinated by these weird designs. They can just be very disturbing sometimes. And you've also got giant baby fetus monsters, weird, dark, disturbing stuff. It was much more toned down in Shadow Hearts Covenant. I would say that there are even creatures in Shadow Hearts Covenant that are just silly. Near the beginning of the game, you're fighting little wooden toy soldiers and toy trains and stuff. It's weird. But not creepy weird. Spell animations in both games are just dazzling and repeatedly interesting and enjoyable to watch. The voice acting in both games, it's very typical JRPG corny from that era, and even from modern anime. So, I mean, if you're used to Japanese, anime where they're going, and making weird, totally unnecessary noises and using inflection that's just over the top and not subtle at all and just weird, you're not going to have any problems with either of these games. Now, the first game is mostly text-based, so if you're like me and that stuff bothers you, it's not going to be a big deal except for just in a few cutscenes spread out throughout the first game. In the second game, much more often they use cutscenes that are in-engine, so there are frequent in-engine cutscenes that use full voice acting. And that, combined with the script being lighter and more jokey, I put that in quotes because I don't think any of those things are funny, but it'll make that second game more annoying to you if you don't like that kind of thing. And there's no option to turn the voices off, so that really sucks. Music in both games is very unique, and it's a perfect fit for the bizarre, otherworldly setting. If I were to try to describe it, it's like a blend of industrial music and Eastern tribal traditions, and with some Gothic, ancient Christian church sounds thrown in, like organ, but the final effect is awesome. I love the score for both of these games. It's just, I mean, it's not really music that you'd really hum to, I mean, it's like it's got these weird kind of chanting things in the background. So I mean, you're not gonna, unless you're into that kind of music, you're not gonna be driving around and humming that chant, But it fits the tone of these games so well. The first game also has tons of creepy atmospheric orchestral effects common to supernatural horror films. Very atmospheric in terms of the audio in both games, and especially the first game. Now, the gameplay is what I really want to talk about here. The gameplay is what makes these things stand out to me. Now, it's typical Japanese RPG turn-based. You know, you've got your dungeon crawling, you've got, going around opening chests. It's not so much like an action RPG where you're doing a ton of looting of bodies. You usually get cash and some basic restorative items when you're fighting bad guys. You're not getting armor and stuff and that you're going to equip immediately or take back to town and sell. It's not that kind of Diablo action RPG type looting. It's more the traditional Final Fantasy. You mostly get just experience and cash from bad guys, and then you open up chests that are scattered around the place for some other goodies. Most of the upgrading that you do is going to be in town with the cash that you find from fighting monsters. You're going to be learning new spells as you progress through the game, and you've got your typical like magic versus physical attacks and bad guys that are going to be strong or weak against those, and including the whole gamut of elemental attacks, and some bad guys are weak to these elements and strong to others. It's that very typical kind of Japanese RPG kind of stuff. You've got some status effects and then healing to counteract those, and also some preventative measures to prevent being poisoned or whatever. But there are some key differences, and they make all the difference. One is your main character. His name is Yuri, which is a pretty common name in Japanese anime and RPGs and stuff. So Yuri, might as well call him Hiro or whatever. But he has these transformations that kind of take the place of summons to a degree in this game. There are other characters that have like these summon animations. Like the spell animations are not just like glowy sparkles and shoot. Some of them are very elaborate. Like the spy in the first game, she can like call in. All of her things involve calling in for support. She gets out her walkie-talkie and she's like, "Yeah, I can use some help here," and then they'll send in like a dive bomber that'll like shoot rockets at the bad guys, or something else like that. But Yuri, he transforms into these monsters, and over the course of the game, he learns to transform into more and more monsters. And these are unique monsters. They're not monsters that you fight during the game. They're monsters unique to him that he can turn into. And every time he changes, it's like a monster movie. He's like, and then he like totally, there's a big flash, and then he's this big hulking beast or whatever. And each one of these monsters has a whole different set of kind of like spell attacks that they can do. So it's really cool unlocking all those, seeing and choosing the right monster for the right occasion and stuff. Really cool stuff. Sanity points. Sanity points is a big part of this game. So you've got your hit points, which you know what that does, magic points, and then you've got these sanity points. And in the first game, which is really dark and very Cthulhu-ish, and it makes the most sense. As soon as battle starts, everybody starts at their max sanity points. But every turn, they lose a sanity point. It goes down and down and down. And Yuri, in addition to that, whenever he turns into one of these monsters, he loses maybe like a big chunk of sanity points, depending on what kind of monster he's turning into. And when they run out of sanity points, they go berserk. They just flip out and they start attacking, their friends, or they started sometimes attacking the bad guys and stuff. And it's a neat little thing that you kind of have to keep track of. And yeah, you've got just like you have healing potions and mana potions, you've got sanity potion type things that you can take to kind of fill that up. But just thematically, it's a cool idea because it represents this idea that the longer that you're interacting with these crazy otherworldly situations, the more it's kind of eating away at your sanity, and eventually you're just gonna snap, And so I just love how mechanically that fits in with the feel of the first game. It's continued on in the second game, but because of the generally lighter tone, it's still largely a dark setting in the second game, but comparatively speaking, to the first game, it's definitely lighter, and so it doesn't feel quite as natural to have the sanity points there. And then I think they continue on in, I don't remember, I didn't play all the way through the third game, but I think the sanity points does continue, and in there it doesn't make any sense because that's such a light game. I'm going to talk about that toward the end here. So sanity points, very cool, very cool. And then the Judgment Ring. This is probably the most memorable, unique attribute of this game. Whenever you're in combat and you're about to execute an attack or execute a spell, or even, or heal somebody, or drink a potion, or when you're shopping in freaking town, this judgment ring comes up and it's a disc. And as soon as it appears, these little wedges in the disc appear. Some of them are really thin, some of them are really thick, and as soon as they all appear, usually there are 1, 2, maybe 3 or more of them, then a little like watch hand begins to spin around the disc, and you have to hit like the X button as it passes into these wedges, these little zones of activation. And if you get the first one, then it'll keep spinning, and you can try to hit the second one and the third one, or however many there are. The more of them that you hit as it spins around, and it just goes around once usually, then the more effective your attack is going to be. In some cases, your attack will either be less effective or won't work at all, or whatever it is that you're doing won't work at all if you miss any of those. Or if you get the first one, but then the second one you miss, then the judgment ring just shuts off, and all you got was the first one. You don't even get a chance to hit the remaining hit areas. And so, the thing spins around at varying speeds, but mostly it's like, so like maybe 1 to 2 seconds to spin around. So, as you're playing the game, you're like going, okay, I'm going to attack, and then you go X, 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 as you're, as the thing is spinning around. And so this very simple element I was very afraid of when I first played this game, because I'd never played any kind of game like this that really required this kind of skill. There was Final Fantasy VIII and Super Mario Bros. RPG, which would give you some bonuses if you hit a button at the right time during an attack, but this game actually was dependent upon being able to do that in order to execute your attacks successfully. If you totally have no hand-eye coordination whatsoever, which I'm pretty close to, then this would be a very frightening thing, and it was for me. But I was able to figure it out after just a few tries. And if you're playing this on newer TVs, you're going to have to go into your TV and turn on the game mode if your TV has one. Otherwise, it's going to screw up your timing, and you'll find these difficult or non-intuitive to do. So if you have a game mode and you play this, you'll want to turn that game mode on. But anyway, this made all the difference for me playing this game, to be able to do this. It just added a level of engagement that I wasn't expecting to enjoy, but I found so riveting. And after playing it this way, it was hard for me, it still is hard for me, to go back and even play traditional, completely turn-based JRPGs that I once loved, because they don't have this element involved. Even like the Final Fantasy active time battle system, it's not the same for me. This is just more, it's, because that is just kind of like stresses me out, because you just got to think fast. And if you can usually adjust that active time system and how fast combat moves in those games. But this is different. It's not about like constantly moving, like, oh, choose your action. Oh, what's my whole strategy? Oh, no. No, it's, you get to choose carefully what your strategy is going to be, but then the moment arrives when it's time to execute, and you got to like focus in and go ba 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 ba, to do the epic awesome spell that's like 90th level or whatever. No, they don't have levels, but anyway, so that's really cool. I've never seen this kind of combat with this kind of combat system done as well before or since. As I said, Final Fantasy VIII and Super Mario RPG were a little bit different, and also I didn't think were near as fun. I often didn't even try to do those extra bonus damage things in those games. And then there was a game called Lost Odyssey. It was the first RPG I played on the Xbox 360, which had something similar. It had like a ring within a ring that would like expand and shrink and stuff, and it just wasn't as good as this. It wasn't as engaging as this. Now, just briefly, I'll talk about From the New World, Shadow Hearts From the New World. That game, the third in the series, features an all-new cast. It was actually produced by a different studio, still the same publishers, I believe, but it was a different studio, and it totally shows. It's got an all-new main cast with little to no connection to previous games outside of near-identical gameplay. So if the gameplay in these first two games is enough to sell you on getting the third one, and like you're just in it for the gameplay, and none of the downsides that I mentioned of the second one bother you at all, then give the third one a try. You might totally dig it. But if the changes I'm describing to Covenant, involving it being lighter and more kind of Japanese anime-like and goofy and silly and stuff, if that kind of stuff would bother you, just avoid Shadow Hearts From the New World, because it is a bright, like neon primary colored game in comparison to the first two games, and it's a lot more quote-unquote jokey and silly and all the stuff you would come to expect from goofy, silly Japanese anime. That entire dark backdrop to the game is lost in From the New World. It's such a shame, especially with a name like Shadow Hearts. You know, the use of the word shadow just implies a sense of darkness, and that's just virtually absent from the New World. So I just can't recommend that one. I didn't even finish playing it myself. I played through about maybe 80% of it, and I was like, finally, just done. I got life to live, you know. Now you can play the first game by itself without feeling any I was going to say compilation, compellment. There's a word there. I'll let you fill it in. To play the second. But if you play Covenant, the story does circle around nicely at the end to complement the story of Shadow Hearts 1. So that's why I've kept Shadow Hearts Covenant. I do think it's not as strong of a game as the original Shadow Hearts, but it's strong enough, and then it nicely circles around at the end to complement the story of the first one, that I've kept it. I'm actually playing through the second one again right now. I've played through the first one 3 times. This will be, I think, my 3rd time now going through the second one as well. So let's talk about relevance. Is there anything of philosophical or moral significance that might stimulate thought or conversation during playing this game or after playing it or whatever? Well, toward the end of the first game, it's subtly suggested that God, capital G God, is a giant alien from across the universe that wants to destroy all humanity. And that kind of fits in with kind of the Cthulhu thing, where the gods are these ancient beings that awaken from slumber to devour all of humanity. And the final battle in that game, I mean, this is, I guess, minor spoilers. It's not really a plot issue, but you're going to fight this thing, this god thing. It's not referred to with a lowercase g. It's not referred to as being a god. The story plays out as though you are going up against the god that many people around the world believe in as part of their religion, who in the Shadow Hearts universe is just one of many of these aliens that live on the other side of the universe. Also in the first game, your primary healer casts spells using a variety of holy books, one of which is the Bible, the rest being largely fictitious religious / supernatural books. So, but I mean, the idea there is, okay, well, the Bible comparatively is actually a low-level spell book, if you will, that she can use to combat these evils. So there's certainly, you know, relativism and universalism alive and well in that first game. And in Shadow Hearts Covenant, the main bad guy is an elite agent of the Catholic Church. Now, he's part of an organization that is actually not part of the Catholic Church, and he's just kind of like embedded or something in the Catholic Church, but and he wears these vestments that are like a cross between the Pope's getup and like what a kung fu guy would wear in a dojo for a sparring session, you know? So it's kind of a weird thing, but, you know, so big shocker, the Catholic Church once again is portrayed as corrupt in geek entertainment, you know? I mean, at the time it felt mildly daring or controversial, and now honestly it just feels tired to have like the monotheistic organized religion of the world harbor the greatest evil. Ooh, big shocker, you know? Also in Shadow Hearts Covenant is what would today be considered pretty homophobic treatment of gay characters. There are a couple of shopkeepers that you see throughout the game who behave like a strong comedic stereotype of gay men, you know, that kind of very flamboyantly gay type of stereotype. And some of the main characters react to them in what would be considered very homophobic ways, just kind of cringing and like, "Ooh, keep him away from me," you know, that kind of thing. So it's hard to say if a given homosexual would be offended by these portrayals. However, you know, and the reason I say that is because, you know, some homosexuals that I've met, they seem to embrace and even thrive off of that flamboyant homosexual stereotype, whereas others do not. So I think it's just going to differ on the individual. I'm ashamed to say there was a time that, you know, in the right company, I might have laughed at this kind of humor and these kind of jokes, or at least getting a little chuckle or something like that. But honestly, you know, playing through Shadow Hearts Covenant now, it, you know, just kind of leaves a bad taste in my mouth. I think that kind of humor, it just doesn't have any usefulness at all, and I think can only do harm. So to sum up, if you want a PS2 Japanese RPG, but would like just a touch of action to keep you on your toes, this is like a bridge between the worlds of Diablo and a true blue turn-based RPG. It's got just a little bit of action to keep you engaged and on your toes. So, and also if you like dark supernatural settings, definitely give at least the first game a try. Both of these first 2 games can be found for around $30 on Amazon. I think the third one can too. Yeah. Anyway, Shadow Hearts is rated mature for blood, gore, and violence. And Shadow Hearts Covenant, is rated teen for language, partial nudity, suggestive themes, and violence. Do yourself a favor, go check them out.
ChristianGeekCentral.com